I'm Paul Hoffschmidt, founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and today I'm joined by Max Munford, CEO and founder of OSSTEC. Thanks, Max, for joining us today.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey, and what brought you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, CEO and founder of OSSTEC. OSSTEC actually began life, realistically, it began life about 10 years ago. So, we're a startup based out of Imperial College London. And our background was actually in research with surgeons and engineers coming together about 10 years ago to say what are the common challenges that the surgeons were seeing in the orthopedics industry and in their surgeries, and engineers from industry saying, well, how do we address those? So that gave rise to a lot of work using 3D printing in the biomechanics lab at Imperial. And then fast forward that, I joined that research about 5 years ago now. During my PhD, we developed some really cool technology where we're using 3D printing in a number of ways to mimic the way that bone naturally works. And then we've been applying that in orthopedic devices, and that gave way to some IP that eventually turned into OSSTEC once we secured some funding as well.
Super interesting. So to dive a little bit deeper into that, so with OSTEC, as you just mentioned, you're building innovative knee implant solutions. To take one step back, how would you explain the advantage or the innovativeness of your product solutions to a layperson?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because orthopedic implants, especially knees and hips, they do work really well, and the existing solutions that are out there have improved so much, and many surgeons are satisfied with what they're currently using. But that also doesn't mean that there's not room for huge amounts of innovation and huge amounts of improvement. And one of the key things that we're addressing is one of the key things that we're addressing is that of fixation in implants. So many implants still fail from a loss of fixation between the bone and the implant interface. Now, most implants are actually still cemented, which is interesting because you don't speak to many surgeons who actively want to use cement. So our vision is to use 3D printing to remove cement from implants, and that's by applying our IP, which is all around biomimetic structures, which replicate bone, applying those into the orthopedic devices so that you get really good, really long-term fixation between the implant and the bone. And one of the cool things that we're doing is we make this structure which mimics bone, not just in the short term, because some other companies have done that as well previously, but our structure actually encourages bone to continue to heal itself long term after the device has been implanted and after years of the patient's usage. And what's particularly interesting about what we're doing is we are able to apply that use of 3D printing not just to sort of flat implants, which other people have done previously with great results, but we're able to apply the 3D printing technology to articulating implants as well, and that's really exciting. There are benefits there not just for patients, not just for surgeons, but for the whole orthopedics ecosystem more broadly. For example, we can simplify the way that supply chains produce implants by reducing the number of processes in the manufacturing cycle, and that leads to cost savings for the manufacturers, for the providers as well.
Interesting. And when you use 3D printing for the fixation part of the implant, is it then personalized to each and every patient, or is it still a general device being used by potentially multiple patients? How is this being used?
Yeah, so we're actually not targeting personalized implants at this point in OSTEC's life cycle. We've done animal studies and human cadaver studies where we made personalized implants, and actually with our IP and our technology and our software, it's no more difficult for us to make a personalized implant that's specific for you or for me or for anyone based on a CT scan. We can do that. But we actually showed in some data which we published that there's no real benefit with our technology there to making implants patient specific. It's like if you go if you go to buy shoes, a shop might sell 10 sizes of shoes. You don't need bespoke made shoes for your feet. At some point there's kind of diminishing returns on how well an implant suits you. So personalization is cool, and lots of companies are using that. We don't think that is where the next big frontier in orthopedics is going to be. we are using at 3D printing in a way that I don't think any other companies currently are, which is for mechanical advantage, so to improve fixation both in the short term and the long term.
Okay, so to summarize that a little bit, you would say what are like the big frontiers in orthopedic implants in the next 10, 15 years, in your opinion?
Well, I think if you look at market trends, we're seeing implant volumes go up, and we're seeing downwards pressure on prices. So if you start with those market trends, volumes going up and prices coming down, I think our technology is really well suited for that environment because we're able to manufacture implants at reduced COGS and with a simpler supply chain. That's ideal for an environment where there's downwards pressure on price. But we can also manufacture those devices faster, and they're cementless, so you can perform the surgeries faster with less burden in the operating room. And we're already seeing, so obviously a crucial trend at the minute is the growth of ASCs in the States, and a cementless device like ours, so a less invasive cementless device, is absolutely ideal for the ASC environment. And that's before you consider the downwards pressure on price, as I say.
Yeah, very interesting. You already talked a little bit about the founding story of OSSTEC 10 years ago at Imperial College London. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit how you joined the project at some point, and how you joined that. What you're thinking as a founder in the MedTech space was to start a company, to my understanding, right out of university, and how your role has changed from the start and going forward.
Yeah. So I'd actually previously worked very briefly in medical devices and in surgical robotics at some amazing companies here in the UK, in Cambridge. And I started my PhD at Imperial. Imperial College, by the way, is a fantastic university and a fantastic place for anyone interested in entrepreneurship or building a venture. Especially at the minute, there are some really great people here and some really great resources to help you build a company. But I started my PhD not because I wanted to go into academia, but because I wanted to own something and to build a company. And I think I realized that although the work that I was doing at some of these other companies was amazing, I felt kind of detached from the final product and the value. So I really wanted to build a company from the ground up, and I wanted to understand it from the ground up. And that led me into the PhD. So it led me to a conversation with my supervisor, so who's now CTO in the company. And we were having a conversation, sort of saying, well, what happens after the research is great, but what happens after that? And that just led very naturally into actually us both being interested in building something beyond the research, and really realizing the value of what we saw in the technology and the IP at that stage. So we began the sort of PhD research, and lots had already been done on the kind of core foundational technology by previous members of the research group, and it was the right time for me and for the technology to come in and really take that to the next level, which was proving and demonstrating the technology potential application. And then that spawned some grant applications and some early initial investment as well.
Interesting. So to be honest, quite a typical starting point for a medical device company coming out of research and then getting started. I assume you already had early work together with clinicians who are probably also involved in the company at some point as advisors and so on. How has this shaped your company's path working with clinicians right from the start?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial to have surgeons and engineers working together in a company like this. You need the voice of the customer, the voice of the user, the voice of the market at the table from the earliest possible stage, and we were really fortunate to have that. When the research was happening, under one roof we had engineers who would join from industry, we had surgeons who were performing hundreds of these surgeries per year. We had representation at conferences, so we were well aware of new technologies being developed. And we had previous founders and founders who had successfully exited as well in the room as well. So all of that under one roof made it ideal for the startup to really take shape. But no, just to talk about surgeons, it's absolutely crucial. These are the people who are going to be ultimately taking a risk when they implant the device, and I think it's absolutely crucial that you have them at the table. And we've actually found that lots of the surgeons we work with are really amazing engineers, and they can explain and articulate engineering concepts to you in a way that you perhaps can't always, coming from a more technical background. So it's absolutely crucial to have surgeons embedded in the company, and to that point, that's kind of that's a real passion of mine, and something that we absolutely believe in at OSSTEC. We, throughout all of our design process, we embed surgeons at every stage of that. Whether it's usability sessions, both here in London and in the States, calls and conversations with surgeons just to kind of bounce quick ideas around, or just saying to them, hey, what do you think about this? Very open-ended. And I think at every stage in our design process, we have surgeons embedded, and I think that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah. And to look a little bit forward, where are you currently on the path to market readiness with your products and to actual market launch?
Yeah, so we're early in that stage, I suppose. We're currently pre-revenue, pre-regulatory approval. We'll be launching next year, and that's actually a really good point. I think regulation, of course, in medical devices is an absolutely essential part of the journey and your route to market. And I mentioned several of the voices that you need at the table. One of the most important ones is regulatory. So we embedded someone who's highly knowledgeable about the regulatory process. We embedded them in the team at a relatively early stage, because that enabled us to kind of map out what our route to market would be. What territories are you targeting first? How are you actually going to get to market there? Of course, that's the regulatory side. But in addition to that, you have more on the market side. As I said, which market are you actually going for? How does reimbursement sit with that? What kind of volumes are you looking at? Where might your clinicians need to be located? What kind of background do they have? What profile do they have? All of that merged into one. But for us anyway, it absolutely started with the regulatory route, and the rest spawned from there.
Okay, med device folks, picture this. What if you could open up a CRM today and it already contained information for every potential lead for you in the country? And you could narrow down those leads further by looking at billing, location, seniority, so much more. Alpha Sophia is the strategy tool that we wish we had when we were commercializing a medical device in the US market. But there's nothing stopping you. So visit alphasophia.com and learn more.
Interesting. You already mentioned the importance of having all different stakeholders at the table, the engineers, the surgeons who are representing the ultimate customer, and also regulatory experts in the early phase. From that journey towards market readiness you've just been describing, what are other advices you would give a founder 3 years earlier, maybe in your shoes? What would you tell them to watch out for?
Yeah. One thing that I think is difficult, especially, so we're a London-based, we're a company based in London in the UK, but like many medical device startups and companies, our eyes are set very much on the UK, but also on the US, and there are very good reasons for that, which I'm happy to go into. The key thing that we always get asked, well, look, you're targeting the US, you're looking at going to the US in addition to the UK. How do you do that? What does that look like? It sounds very difficult. How do you do that when you're the other side of the pond? And I think the advice that I would give is that you need to be in the room. There are amazing conferences that you can go to where you can meet all of your potential customers, all of the market access experts who might exist in your space, much like how we met, actually, Paul. So I think that's absolutely crucial. You need to be in the room, and if that means that you're attending key conferences, meeting customers, speaking at specific hospitals that you're going to be targeting, then that needs to happen. And there's a human cost associated with that, but it's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, that's so true. Exactly. We met at LSI, the Emerging MedTech conference in Dana Point earlier this year, and started talking about challenges finding the right key opinion leaders on the US market and so on. So maybe to go a little bit deeper into that, you're currently, to my understanding, looking at finding further key opinion leaders, people to work together in clinical trials and so on. And you're also using our platform, Alpha Sophia, but in more general, what are strategies or filters or criteria you're looking at when you look for key opinion leaders and early adopters for your solution? You already mentioned location, but maybe there's a framework you are thinking in to find the ideal people for an early phase. I think that's quite interesting to understand.
No, definitely. I mean, for us in the orthopedic space, at least there are lots of factors which play into how we pick the key opinion leaders who we need to work with and who we want to work with. So we have our clinical advisory board at the minute, made up of surgeons from both the UK and the US. And these are really amazing surgeons. They're fantastic to work with. As I say, they're not just surgeons, but they're market leaders, research leaders, engineers. These are really amazing people who we have as our design surgeons, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with them. Beyond that, we also will be targeting sort of clinically focused surgeons, so surgeons who really understand the problem that we're targeting, but also have a really strong publication output. So it's not just, people talk about volume, it's not just about volume, but it's about what people are doing, what surgeons are doing with the volume of patients that they're seeing. If they're a high volume research center, that's particularly powerful for our kind of second phase of launch. I mean, beyond that, even further, in terms, you need to look at where you're likely to win customers from. So for us on cementless devices, we will be winning customers from surgeons who are currently using cemented devices. So a key part of our strategy is identifying the users of cemented devices who are most likely to switch to using a cementless device because they see the pains and see the benefits of a cementless device.
Understood. And how do you usually approach new surgeons? Do you try to go to conferences which they also attend? I mean, that's always the secret. How do you get like the attention of a physician? Those 5 minutes of time to make your initial pitch. Is there a strategy? I mean, I've heard anything from writing handwritten letters to sending video messages and so on. I mean, it's quite the magic trick box how to get the attention of those busy doctors. Is there anything you've tried which has worked particularly well, or through networks or?
Yeah, so there are several things there. I mean, our background is at Imperial College, where we have a very good research publication output. So leveraging our knowledge and our presence in the research space actually was a very good way to kind of refine the funnel of surgeons who we kind of intersect with. That definitely worked well there. Beyond that, leveraging our existing network. As I said, we've been fortunate enough to have surgeons embedded in the research in the company from before day one. So leveraging them and their connections and their introductions at conferences has gone a huge way. But I think the key thing there is you need to be in the room. Writing an email is fantastic, but that is never as good as being there in person. Being in Dallas at the ACUS conference, being able to say to someone who you know or you get introduced to, hey, should we go and have a coffee? There's no substitute for that, really.
Yeah, and what I personally see from our journey is that it often also requires multiple touch points. It might be that you've been able to send someone a few information via email before, they didn't respond, but then at some point they see you on a podcast like this, and then at a later point they you meet them at a conference, and then they've already heard your name, heard your company name, maybe heard about your concept, and the conversation is already warmed up and gives you a better starting point to then go into a deeper discussion much quicker.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we've always done is kind of map out the whole pipeline of customer experience, I suppose. So, if this is where we want to end up, well, what can we share with someone, what can we discuss with someone now that is of value to them and is kind of a win-win that's interesting in that conversation for them, whether it's just showing the latest prototype that we have, or I've had emails with someone where we share a paper that we published, and I know that they're interested because they published in an adjacent space, and that spawns a very natural conversation, and you can follow up in person. So things like that, I think finding the intersection points of the various surgeons with what you're doing, and kind of what can you bring to the table that's interesting for them, what can you make as a win for them to help facilitate that next stage of conversation.
That's interesting. I've actually heard other customers of intelligent solutions like ours talk to physicians and show them, here, those are the other physicians in your market, in your city, who are doing similar procedures as you. Have a look at their profiles, what they do, to give them some market intel, which surgeons are often interested in, then provide some value on that dimension and get into a discussion. But that's probably something more when you're more on a direct sales interaction already, and currently you're more looking for strategic partners, key opinion leaders to work together at that current stage. You already mentioned the importance of the US market for you as a UK-based startup, but I mean, that probably applies to everyone from overseas, from Europe and any other locations. What's your general thinking about the importance of the US market as a MedTech startup? Can you build a big company in MedTech today in Europe without launching on the US market early, or what are your thoughts about that? And I believe you probably have put a lot of strategic thought into that.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that. I think there are key main reasons why lots of companies, especially in orthopedics, target the US. Obviously the size of the market is a large consolidated market. People talk about, comparing the US and Europe. Europe is, 27 different markets, rather than the US being one. The key thing that for me links in with that is the reimbursement situation. As I say, once you've accessed the US market, it's a large consolidated market with one flat, it's not necessarily flat, but relatively flat reimbursement landscape across the whole country there. And of course, the regulatory system as well. I think the FDA is at the minute a real leader in the regulatory landscape as well. Everything from whether it's 510K or otherwise for a startup, there's so much certainty in the FDA system. For us, we can actually get hold of someone at the FDA and have a conversation with them and clarify route forwards. And I just don't think that flexibility and that process exists in the same way in other regulatory structures elsewhere.
I mean, after all, the US market is something like 40% of the global healthcare market. In one market, you have to, I don't know, how many other countries, 30 other countries in Europe you probably have to bring together to make the same thing happening in terms of size, if you ever get there. So it's just from a market opportunity perspective, it's just insane how big that market and opportunity is. And also, I mean, yeah, sorry.
No, it's not just about the, as I say, it's not just about the size, but the certainty around the regulation and the openness of the reimbursement structure there. For me, those are two really important parts. Everyone talks about the size, and yeah, big numbers are fantastic, but with the FDA, especially coming from the UK, we have something called Brexit going on. But in the US, you can actually guarantee a route forwards. And if there are any questions or things that we're unsure about, we can have a call with someone. We can speak to the FDA about it. That just doesn't exist elsewhere. So there's a certainty and an openness in the US market, which is really attractive for startups like us.
Do you think there's going to be a disadvantage for patients in other geographies if regulators in other markets don't pick up to the speed and efficiency of the FDA in the next coming years?
Well, I mean, there are lots of markets that are accepting FDA approval. So I do think people will benefit from the current FDA structure, and they'll benefit from the way the US medtech market is. Other countries will definitely benefit from that. In the UK here we have the NHS, which is wonderful, but it is necessarily risk averse in terms of the timeline to adopt new innovations. So I think you need both. You need a system like we have in the NHS, and the NHS is a wonderful thing, but you also need to help innovation progress. You need options like there are in the US. There's a very strong pipeline for different territories to adopt new innovations.
Interesting. Maybe on a higher level, and we've already talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but maybe stepping one step even further back. Are there any other overarching market trends in MedTech in general you're currently seeing or you see folding out over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are always challenges with fundraising in medtech, and I think this will continue to be a problem. Fundraising more broadly, I think still hasn't recovered to what it has been previously. In medtech, many investors still aren't sure how to bridge this gap. We have some early stage investors, and actually in the UK there are several schemes that are really good at incentivizing early stage investors. But later stage investors, as far as I can see, seem to push later stage and later stage. And I think, that's definitely a challenge for medtech. It is unlike many other markets because you have so many different skills that are needed to develop a product. Developing a product in a startup in any market is difficult, and I do think in medtech there are added challenges which perhaps don't exist elsewhere. And I think investors aren't necessarily sure how to respect that. I think other challenges as well. If I can speak for orthopedics, the market in much of orthopedics is owned by several key players. There are benefits to that. It means that it's very clear where your potential exits might lie. It's very clear what a scaling distribution partnership might look like. What it does mean is that I think there are fewer opportunities for organic growth in orthopedics and perhaps elsewhere in medtech than there are in other industries. That's especially true for orthopedics.
Interesting. Maybe one last closing question. What's up next for OSSTEC in the next couple of months and years? What's going to be your main priority?
Yeah, growth is very much the name of the game. We are currently growing our operations and our team as well ahead of our launch next year. And beyond that, we'll be scaling, onboarding more surgeons, as we discussed, ahead of growth and strategic partnerships beyond that. So it's a very exciting time to be at OSSTEC, and there's lots on the horizon.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I wish you the best of luck. I'm looking forward to cheering from the sidelines. Thanks for joining us today, Max, and looking forward to speaking soon, maybe in a year after your market launch, and to hear how it has gone. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to it.
Can you afford to have a rep in every county, or do you need to be hyper-targeted in your outreach? Do you need to know information about your targets going in to be successful? Or do you have years and years before you want to close that deal? If you want to be focused, if you want to deliver fast, you should visit alphasophia.com and help your sales team out.